Now, at this point, I would like if you would go ahead and openly criticize me if you'd like to, because we've had this discussion, and I think it's important for people to watch this to know where my feelings have been so you can improve, because it's easier if you watch what I've done wrong, and hopefully it won't happen to you. But I know, it says here, the next principle is cultivate the tone of your voice. And I know that I can be, if left to my devices, caustic, I can be surly, I can be sarcastic. I can even say things that you, as a man who grew up in the South on the plantation, or in the cotton field, I should say, and you grew up in the segregated community, that comments that could be offensive. And you've taught me, hey, I don't think that's what you meant to say, but this is what I just heard. Can you talk to me about how important it is to cultivate your tone of voice and maybe some of the things you teach people like me that when they're...
In the world of business and in life and preparing to be in business wherever you are, you're just going to run into a great variety of people. And first and foremost, it's important to realize that as people, we all live with and among each other, and we bring great gifts to each other. But there's another reality, is that we can segment people, we can have terminology that may sound okay to us, but it may not sound good to another person.
I'm just going to throw an example of a word I can't use, just so you can tell me why. As we're making Thrive, right? You make Thrive, and Thrive is for everybody. Right. It doesn't matter where you're from, and the whole idea is living at your peak, helping you grow from where you are to where you want to be. And if I were to say, well, that's a conservative, or that's a liberal, why is it not healthy to put people into that conservative or liberal description if you're talking about American politics?
Well, I would say that life is on a continuum, and if you look through the history of politics in America or wherever, it changes. Circumstances changes things. People change things, and to define everybody strictly one way all the time, I think we miss out on who the people or that person really is. Mm-hmm. And I think there's always a person under the label. Get to know the person. When I buy something from the store, we use, and it comes in a jar, a mason jar, we usually take the label off and wash the label away because we got the stuff that's in it. It's gone. It's the stuff that's in it that's important, not the label. Mm. And people are more important than the labels we give them.
So how would you recommend that we cultivate our tone of voice? Is it just being self-aware and making sure that you're really using the words that you mean when you say, or you're cultivating, is it just being self-aware of how you say things and how you say things and what you say?
I think there's a word called empathy.
Empathy.
And
that's a new word.
Yeah, there's a word called empathy. You're placing yourself in another person's shoe. You're placing yourself in another person's table. Mm. So you beginning to think in terms of if I were there, what would that do to me, or what would that say to me? And I think as we live in a much broader society where the transactions are between such a great diversity of people, that we have to be more attuned to the humanity that we share rather than the nuances of our differences.
Now, the final principle here in our science of personal achievement, and looking at what successful people do and the kind of the mindsets that they have that allow them to get from where they started to where they end up there at the top of their profession or career. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. Now, we've heard this quote's been attributed to Napoleon Hill. We've heard quotes similar that are attributed to Henry Ford or Walt Disney, but the concept that what the mind can think about, it can bring about. Can you talk to me in your life how you've seen that happen, where you literally took something that was just a far removed idea and watched it turn into reality? Can you think of that in your
My whole life. And I'm not being facetious, because I look at the place where I started, and I look at the assets that I had in order to make this journey what it is today. And I realized that I could have very easily failed. I mean, there was enough stuff around me to make failure a reality. But instead, I began to look at what was possible. I began to believe what I could do. And I began to focus on that in a very intentional way throughout my life. So I look at my own life as a prime example of what one can really, truly do.
I have had about 17 epiphanies here tonight, and I appreciate all of this that you've shared with us, because it blows my mind. And I want to encourage everybody watching this, if you have not yet read your book, Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored.
That was my very first book.
That book blew my mind. Hey, Clifton, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us here tonight, and I know you have a lot of places you could be and a lot of places maybe you should be, but I appreciate you doing that, because I know that you've lit a spark for somebody watching this. And again, I just want to tell you thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.